Real quick, guys, this is a post-recording, editing situation of the original whole episode. I wanted to include, to make sure, because I forgot to say in the episode, I wanted to make sure that I include this resource for you guys. This is my buddy, Jesse and Justin Gruber. On their podcast, Carpe Fide, a little while ago, they did a whole Education is Warfare series and talking about the public school situation and things going on there, Christian school, homeschooling, all that. So go to their podcast, Carpe Fide, episodes 121 to 127. That's their whole Education is Warfare series. And if you listen to that, that will just make what I'm saying in this episode, in my episode, it'll make all of that make a lot more sense. So I highly suggest go check out their Education is Warfare series on their Carpe Fide, CarpeFide, Carpe Fide podcast, episode 121 to 127. Check that out. Let's jump back into the episode. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22, verse 6. That verse will make a lot more sense when I get into the episode. So welcome back, guys, to another episode of the True Strength Life podcast. This is episode 158. Homeschoolers are just the worst. So find out more of what I'm talking about. But before we get into the episode, we got some house cleaning things to take care of real quick for a minute. TrueStrengthApparel.com. Get you this hat, eat good, lift heavy, pray hard. The hat, t-shirt, hoodie, got the podcast shirt on right now. Much more. So go to TrueStrengthApparel.com. Use code podcast for 10% off all your orders there. And also get my books. They're right there. And side note, if you guys are just listening to the audio, I do have video of this show. And I've been trying to teach myself and learn how to edit more, so there's added pictures and all if you watch the video. So yeah, if you could go on YouTube, Spotify, that plays the video. But if you're listening just on Apple, I'm not sure yet if Apple's going to have the video up yet, but they might. So it might be video everywhere. But yeah, just so you know, the YouTube channel, True Strength Life Podcast, there is video to this. So anyway, on Amazon, get the Rooted and Rising and ABC Primer books by me, Aaron Simpkins. Go to ScienceSupps.com, SUPPS.com. Get this Quench protein, the best clear protein on the market. Award-winning protein, officially award-winning, best tasting clear protein in America by one of my best friends. It's super legit, and I've been saying that for a long time, and now there's an award behind it. Quench protein, it's the best. Use your code TrueStrength for 15% off there. And for all your supplements, your health supplements that you're going to buy anyway, go to TigerFitness.com. You should be going to Tiger Fitness anyway. I've been buying from them forever. But you can help out my show a little bit and all that's going on here. Just go to TigerFitness.com/TrueStrengthLifePodcast. That's all you got to do. Just type that in and all the back end stuff happens on its own. But if you just type that in, TigerFitness.com/TrueStrengthLifePodcast, then when you go through your order and you hit submit and all that, I get a little bit of kind of like a commission on the back end. So if you're going to buy your supplements anyway from Tiger Fitness, why not support your boy? So let's get into why homeschooling is the worst. There are the reason I'm talking about this topic specifically, why this came to mind, there is a couple pretty fairly popularly known podcasters, old crotchety women, Jennifer Welch and Andy Sullivan, and they have a podcast. I don't even want to say the name because it's just so bad. That I've Had It podcast. And they recently went viral for saying some crazy thing about homeschooling and homeschoolers. And so I want to do a little reaction to those and give some input. Now, quick backstory. I've definitely brought this up before on the podcast, but there's basically nothing, if I'm trying, how do I say this? There's basically nothing in life that I would consider myself an expert in, maybe well-versed in a few different things. But if there was anything that I would maybe be more than well-versed in, maybe not quite expert, but more than well-versed, it would be homeschooling, just the general topic of homeschooling. Why? Because I've literally lived it my entire life. I was homeschooled from day one. I have a very unique upbringing in the fact that when I was young for a few years, my parents literally worked for a homeschooling business where we were the only business doing this at the time in the entire country, probably, which means the world, where we had what was called a bookmobile. And we converted a bus to a traveling library, basically. And this is back in the 90s. So this is, before you could order, anything you wanted online. So for people to get homeschool curriculum and books and all, it was kind of like your local bookstore, or it was a lot harder. It was a lot harder to get your hands on homeschool curriculum. So what the business that we were a part of, the Bookmobile, we literally traveled the country. By the time I was like 10, I had been in, I don't really remember, and it wasn't like we were touring everywhere, but I had been in, I think, like 28 states. And so what we would do is we would park up different spots and, advertise it in the local area through the local churches and stuff. And our whole thing was we would bring to sell homeschool curriculum and homeschool books to the local families and wherever, we stopped at. So nobody else has that story except for the, handful of people that were with us. So I was homeschooled fully until 11th grade and only went part-time 11th and 12th to private school and was part-time homeschooled. Now fast forward to having my own kids, my wife and I, mainly my wife, we homeschool and have from day one. And obviously my parents who homeschooled me are, 100% on board and supportive of us homeschooling. So, like I said, through my many conversations with many people who have homeschooled and currently still do, or who are currently doing it, and growing up in that in a way that basically nobody else in the world has, and then just being homeschooled myself, I would say that I am definitely at least a level over well-versed. I'm gonna try to be humble and say I'm not maybe necessarily an expert in homeschooling, but through life experience, I am definitely somebody who can talk on this issue. So to say all that, now this is the part with my video editing that I still haven't figured out, and I will someday, but guys, just stick with me. I'm going to play some audio clips from these ladies and just give a quick reaction to them. Now, like I said, with my editing, someday I will figure out how to put it on the screen and play it and then react to it. Right now, you got to deal with me holding my phone up to the microphone and doing it that way. But it's not long, so here we go. So here is Angie Sullivan having a little meltdown about homeschooling.
I think homeschooling is a bad idea from soup to nuts. I don't care if you're a nuclear physicist. I think it's just weird as that you want your kids around you all day, every day, and all night. And just the socialization. For me personally, it was that I would have gotten up on my hands and knees and strapped them to my back and crawled to get them to school every day, just to get them where I wasn't. So I don't trust somebody that wants to be with their kids 24/7. I think a lot of dumb people do it because it's just easier, and that's a concern. I just can't think of very many good things about homeschooling. I just think homeschooling is a bad idea from soup.
So, gosh, of course, as soon as I'm playing it, I get all my, whole bunch of messages and texts coming through. Anyway, she said some things there. Okay. Apparently, dumb people homeschool. Apparently, it's really weird to want to be with your children. And what else did she say? She thinks it's easier. I played that clip for my wife, who, like I said, does I'll say all, because I work all day and she's with them. So I'm not really doing any schooling with them. But so she does it all. Shout out my wife. I love her. I played that clip for her and she was dumbfounded. She was like, easier? It's like, how is it easier to school and teach and think about and prepare school lessons and things like that, and making sure they're doing, they're understanding everything and processing everything as they're doing their school? How is that easier day in and day out than literally just waking up, shoving them into the van and dropping them off to somebody else for 8 hours and and saying that they're your problem, and then going and doing whatever the heck you want for the day? How in the world is that easier? Yeah, my wife kind of lost it. But yeah, you're going to notice it too in the other clip. These two ladies are showing their cards in that they are just godless. They're godless. And a lot of this is sad, honestly, because a lot of this is coming from a place with them where you can tell that their entire existence is self-centered. Their entire existence is me, me, me. The world revolves around me. Everything in my life has to please me. I have to be happy with every single thing that I do. Everything's about my happiness. Everything is about me. And, to the point where I don't want to put the burden of raising my children on me. I want to shove it off to somebody else for the majority of their upbringing, because that's what schooling is. I don't know if anybody told you that, but if you send your kids to school all day for 5 days a week, for up from kindergarten, from preschool to 12th grade, you're not raising your children the majority of the time. I don't know if anybody told you that, but that's the reality. And so they're showing their cards in that their whole existence is about them. It's because they don't have God. I mean, that's what it is. That's why I said it's sad, because I want to see them love Jesus. I want to see them have the grace and love of Jesus in their life. Because if they did, they would love and appreciate the things that really make life fulfilled, which are things like your children, marriage, and family, and God, all being top priorities in your life. God, family, in that order. And and when somebody doesn't have that, when somebody is really promoting a life that's against those things, it's really sad. There's so many things that, I could get on them about this and that, and I could make fun of them and call them crazy liberals and all this stuff. I could say all that, and all of it probably being true. But at the end of the day, it's sad. And I don't want to just dog on them and, call them all these names and say all that, because it's sad that people live like that. Like, they're not the only ones that think this way. But people who do think this way, it's because they don't have the Lord in their life. And it's because they have positioned them as an idol in their own life. They've positioned themselves as the number one end all of everything in life, and the universe revolves around them. And that's just a really sad way to live. It's a very self-centered, prideful way to live. And ultimately, when you see people living that way, it's just sad. But everything she just said in there is just wrong. Like, she thinks that, that dumb people do it. She thinks that it's easier. She doesn't want to, and along with everything I just said being sad and all, her worldview, she said, I don't want to be around my kids. I want to do everything possible to get rid of them for the day. I feel bad. I feel sorry for her to have those thoughts and opinions on her own children. Imagine being her own children and hearing that. But a person who lives with a worldview like she has, of being me first, and me is all that matters, and me matters the most, she's not going to consider her, how would my kids react to this if they hear me say this? She doesn't care. And that's sad. So let's play the other clip, see if this gets any better.
These people that do the homeschooling, these are people that fear critical thinking more than anything on the planet, that have to be taught a script of reality, and that they are incapable of critically thinking. They're incapable of deduction skills. And what pisses me off about this the most is how many parents project a script onto their kids. I'm a dumb, so therefore I'm going to make sure you're a dumb. This is trickle-down stupidity. This is MAGA on steroids. This is MAHA. This is tradwife. This is unvaxxed and unjacked and all that. America has a crazy Christian problem.
All right. We fear critical thinking. Did you know that? Other homeschoolers, listen to this. Did you know that we fear critical thinking? Did you know that we're not capable of it? And going along with, the other lady, did you know that we're stupid? Did you know that, we cannot critically think? So in other words, a lot of people, most people who homeschool because they have critically thought about the issues of public schooling, and they've actually thought through their family situation and how they want to bring their children up, and how they want to teach them, and yes, a lot of what they want to teach them, and the life that they want to bring their kids up in, the family situation they want to bring their kids up in. They've thought through the socialization aspect of not wanting to be raised by their peers, but wanting to be raised by adults, and specifically their own parents for the most part. Did you know that to make those decisions, we are not able to critically think? Did you know that that's part of it? Did you know that, what else she say? She said that we're fed a script, because all homeschoolers are exactly the same, right? It's so odd to me when I hear atheists, that was Jennifer Welch. Jennifer Welch is an atheist. The other lady, in some other clips I've seen of her, she says that you'd be amazed by how many homeschool moms there are in the Bible study. So I don't know if she was talking about currently, like her going to a Bible study, or past experience. I would assume it's past experience because the way that she just talks about anything, she does not sound like somebody who's a believer who goes to church. But I could be wrong. But this Jennifer Welch lady, she is a very much an outspoken atheist. So an atheist like her, I'm not surprised, has those opinions because secular humanist atheists like her, they think they're the peak of the food pyramid. They think they're the peak of all existence of creatures. And they think that being an atheist, they think that you are only capable of properly thinking and critically thinking and having the right thoughts and the right way that you go about things is you're only capable of doing that through being an atheist like her. So if you land anywhere else, then you're not a critical thinker. Well, that seems pretty unreasonable. It seems like you're being pretty dogmatic and putting yourself kind of in the same box that you're putting other people in. And from that same standard and logic that you're coming from, you can only be a critical thinker if you're in my worldview. But at the same time, supposedly you would be the freedom of thought people. Well, some people using their freedom of thought and their own critical thinking, they might come to different conclusions than you. But you can't be mad at them. By what standard are you, could you disagree with them and be mad at them? And I'll give her one point that she said we have a crazy Christian problem in America, because she doesn't benefit from and live in the greatest country that's ever existed that was based off of Christian principles. We'll leave that aside. One, I wouldn't say it's a crazy Christian problem, but yes, I would give her that. Not all, definitely not all, but the majority of homeschoolers are Christian. And it's because of that verse that I read in the very beginning of the episode. It's because of things like that and other scripture that we are given instructions as parents to raise our children up in the way they should go. And homeschooling gives us the most amount of freedom and ability to do that. So am I gonna, as a Christian man who knows it's objectively true, Jennifer Welch, whether you want to believe that or not, yeah, I understand. I can't force you to be a Christian. I can't make you be a Christian. That would literally be the antithesis of what it means to be a Christian. It has to be something you believe, even though it is objectively true that Christ did die on the cross and rise again. So I can't make you believe that, but Christians are generally the ones that homeschool because that gives us the ability it gives us more of an ability to infuse the entire worldview that we hold and we believe into our upbringing and our raising and our teaching of our children. Because I don't know if you've ever thought through this, but the Bible instructs us in many ways. No, it's not a math book. No, it's not a science book, but there are things in Scripture that do, have implication for other topics. So like when you're studying, the universe and the earth and origins and things like that and how things started and the origins of man and animals and all that. Well, what the Bible says is going to clearly have implications for how you're going to study and view that issue, as opposed to just trying to be an atheist and trusting what Darwin said or whoever else, evolutionist atheists that are secularists that comes up with any number of explanations and the Big Bang and this and that and evolution and my great grandpapa's rock and some bacteria and all this, everything just exploded from nothing by nothing, and here we are. I'm not the illogical person to believe that creation had a creator. Because for anything to be, there has to be a creator. Nothing didn't explode by nothing to then just have everything. That doesn't make any sense, okay? So yes, the Bible is going to inform so much of how we want to raise our children and teach them in a worldview. Because whether you like it or not, when your kids go to school, they're being taught from a worldview. So, when they're being taught history, they're being taught from a worldview. When they're being taught, science and the origin topics, everything I just talked about, they're being taught from a worldview. So if it's not a Christian worldview, it's going to be something else. And in our society, it's going to be an atheist worldview. And, they're not necessarily going to say that there's a right and wrong. That's why there's so many kids' books in the school libraries and local libraries that are literally just porn. They're drawing images of kid porn and promoting it to kids to say that, it's okay to explore your sexuality and it's okay to mess around with friends and this is how you do it and this is what you do and this goes there. And that's why those things happen, because there's no standard for any of this morality in the books and in the curricula that they use in school systems. So yes, you can call me a crazy Christian all you want. I don't see it as a problem, but you can call me that. And I'm going to promote homeschooling to everybody that I know, probably the entire rest of my life, because I do believe it is the best way. I do not believe that every parent can homeschool. That's a different conversation. I do believe overall homeschooling, especially as a Christian, but I do believe that homeschooling is the best way to go for many different reasons. I do not believe that every parent can do it necessarily in their current state of mind. But all that to say, let's just say, I just real quick Googled, anybody else can do this. I said, show me stats on comparing homeschoolers to public schoolers. That's all I said. That was my only prompt. AI gave me this back. Homeschooled students generally outperform public school students on standardized academic tests, college attendance rates, and social emotional development assessments. It does say, however, public schools maintain higher tracked high school graduation rates and provide standardized curriculums taught by state-certified teachers. Standardized curriculums taught by state-certified teachers. That sentence right there sounds good to a lot of people, but there's also a lot of people where that sentence would be a turnoff to send them to school, okay? Just so we're clear there. And the higher tracked high school graduation rate, that's just because not every homeschool kid goes through an actual graduation. There is a way to do that and get a high school diploma. There is a way to do that, but a lot of homeschoolers, they just move on into college, or they get a GED because that's a lot easier of a process than getting a diploma through a homeschool organization. But it is possible. But that's why those rates I like that. What else? Homeschool students average in the 65th to 80th percentile on K through 12 achievement tests. Public school students average around 50th. SAT to SCT scores. Homeschoolers scored an average of 1190 on the SAT compared to 1060 for public schoolers. They're also 1.4 to 2.2 higher on ACT. According to research from the National Home Education Research Institute, Black homeschooled students scored 23 to 42 percentile points higher than Black public school students. College attendance, about 74% of homeschool students attend college. Only 44% of public school students follow the same path. College success. Homeschoolers maintain a higher average college graduation rate, 67 to 59%, and higher average college GPAs, 3.46 versus 3.6 or 3.16 compared to public school. Civic engagement. Adults who were homeschooled participate in local community service and volunteer work at statistically higher rates than public school alumni. Higher rates of community volunteerism, scouting, and multi-age group sports compared to the social environment of kids in school, where it's built-in daily peer interaction, but higher exposure to peer pressure and bullying. Curriculum structure. This is comparing. Homeschooling says higher variable, unstructured formats can cause kids to fall 1 to 4 grades levels behind. They're looking at as a negative. I looked at as, so what? I really don't care what the state says my kid should be at a given age. In some subjects, yeah, they might be behind 1 to 2 subjects, but also in these other subjects over here, my kids are well above the state average. And I also guarantee my kid is also not getting any Bible teaching in the state school. So yeah, the social aspect part, like I said, I've heard every single point, I've heard every single question my entire life, because I've lived it and now I'm living it again. And I've lived it through being homeschooled myself. I'm living it again through now doing the homeschooling. I've heard every question. They've never changed. They've basically been all the same questions. And the probably the most common question is, what about socialization for my homeschooler? I'm so worried about them not being around friends. You had to ask yourself some questions, like do they have to be around peers every single day? I agree it's good to be around friends, probably several times a week or at least once or twice a week. But does it have to be all day, every day? Does it have to? Is that actually good for them? And if they're in that environment, yes, they're going to be more susceptible to bullying and to peer pressure, things like that. So there's that. But there's also the question of you're worried about them not being socialized, and your thinking of that is socialized with other kids. What about the socialization of, do you want them being raised more by their peers who are dumb and rebellious just like them, being young people? Or do you want them being raised more by you, their number one person in their life that loves them and wants to see the best for them? Like, in other words, do you want you to be the number one influence in their life, or do you want their peers, their age, to be the number one influence, and other adults that you don't really know? You don't know them. You don't know what type of worldview they hold. You don't know what they're saying, in one-on-one situations with your kid. You don't really know anything about them. So do you want them being raised by adults you don't know, and you don't know what they believe, and also their own peers that are just as young and dumb as your kids are? Or do you want them to be raised by you mainly? I mean, if you're like that first lady we listened to, Angie Sullivan, she doesn't want to be around her kids apparently, and wanted them to be gone as quickly as possible. So there are people like that out there, which is really sad, and we already talked about all that and why that is. But I would say probably for the majority of parents who actually love their children, you would agree you want to be the main influence in raising and bringing up your children in the way that they should go, as opposed to their peers. There's also the social aspect that because many homeschoolers are Christian, and you always hear this, and I've heard this, again, my entire life. Well, I want my children to from a Christian standpoint, I want my children to be in public school because I want them to be little missionaries on the mission field. And the public school is the mission field because, there's only going to be them and a couple others that are Christians. Okay, great. But problem is, missionaries don't go on the mission field without hardcore training for several years that has been drilled into them, and they basically know how to go about every scenario that is going to be brought up to them. They've gone through that training, through that boot camp. Your kid hasn't. Your kid's not trained up like a missionary. Little 5-year-old Sally is not a trained missionary. She's just 5-year-old Sally, and she's going to go along to get along with her friends. Don't get me wrong. I've heard, the one-off exceptions of kids, Christian kids who do make a great impact in their public schools for the Lord through their influence. There are those one-off stories, and they are amazing. But the majority of parents, Christian parents who mean well, who have this mentality, my kid's a missionary on the mission field of the public school. Guess who ends up being changed? It's your kid. Far and above, that is what happens way more than the other way around. And it's because they're kids. They're kids. This isn't like a 30-year-old adult, who can stand firm a little better on their own around a group of people that they're the only ones that think and believe the way they do. And they want to be an influence for that to this, these rest of their dozens or hundreds of kids around them that don't believe that way. We're not talking about a 30-year-old adult. And most 30-year-old adults don't even do that. And we expect our kids to do that. That's insane. Vodi Bakum has this very famous quote. He says, when it comes to this topic of Christian parents sending their kids away to a non-Christian school, to a public school, he says, because all these parents for generations now have sent their Christian kids away to school. And then, by the time they become teenagers or by the time they graduate high school and then go to continue their secular education, they go to a secular college. And at some point in that time, teenager to secular college age, we can't be surprised when we send our kids away to Caesar that they come back as Romans. Why more Christian parents don't understand that? I don't know. I don't know if it's ignorance. I don't know if it's you are not. I would say, quite honestly, I'm going to be a little blunt here, sound a little harsh. I would say would change the lack of critical thinking point that Jennifer Welch was trying to make. I would say as a Christian parent, you're lacking critically thinking about this whole issue if you're sending your kid to public school. I would highly question how much you've really considered all of the different angles and all of the different things that go into that. But like I said before, I do not believe that every single parent can homeschool. So it'd be a conversation, and I've had these conversations with people. But there's so much your kid growing up godly is far more important than your kid growing up as just a good kid. Because they're going to automatically be good if they're godly. But you don't want just a good kid that gets good grades, that, does what they're told at school and stays out of trouble, goes to college, gets a degree, goes and gets a career, lives that career, probably gets married somewhere along the way, goes to church Christmas and Easter, gets older, retires from their good job because they went because they got a good degree. They worked a good career for so long, and then they retire, and then they get a good boat. They might have a lake house or a second house, vacation home somewhere, and probably have a good relationship with their grandparents or with their grandkids, things like that. And then they die. A lot of you might hear what I just said and been like, what's the problem with everything you just said? The problem is none of those things are bad in themselves. I'm not saying those are evil and bad. What I'm saying is that's not the ultimate goal you want your kids to pursue. Those are not the ultimate things. God is the ultimate thing. You much rather want your child to love Jesus and live for Jesus and love other people and be poor than you want them to have a good career and be not poor, but just treat God as like, he's just there whenever I want him, he's there. I'll reach out the next time I get sick. I'll reach out the next time somebody gets hurt. I'll reach out the next time that, somebody close to me dies. I'll reach out the next time, I get in a car accident. That's not what you want. And all that to say, am I saying that you can make your kids Christians? No, I don't believe that either. Am I saying that, if you go this whole route of homeschooling and teaching them in the Word and in the ways of the Lord and keep them around other Christian parents and kids, that they're going to grow up to be godly people and Christians on their own and have their own relationship with God? No, that's no guarantee. It never is. But you're setting them up much better for that. And it comes down to most important things. What are the most important things? Well, like I said before, your kid actually loving the Lord is the most important thing. All those other things are second and third and fourth and fifth on the list. You want your kids to love the Lord, period. But I guess I'm just contributing to the crazy Christian problem, and that's totally fine with me. So with that, just know, episode 158, homeschoolers, we're just the worst. Remember, truth is strength.